listening to Marvel Talk with JT. And here's your host, JT.
Hello and welcome to Marvel Talk with JT. I am your host, JT, and we are here tonight to talk all about that season finale of Daredevil Born Again, Episode 9, titled Straight to Hell. Now, if you've listened to the previous episodes of the entirety of Daredevil Born Again, then you know that I'm about to tell you what IMDb gave it out of 10. Now, you do not have to take these scores with, to the grave with you guys. You don't have to trust it fully. This is what people went on here, rated it. This is what IMDb says. I am recording this episode 2 days after the episodes come out, so it kind of has a little bit of time to fluctuate, take in all the the ratings. But anyways, episode 9, Straight to Hell, is a 9.1 out of 10 on IMDb. So, the people like it. People like it. Now, do some of my friends that I talk to, do they like it? Well, that's what we'll find out later in this episode. But, wow. Yeah. Episode 9 is definitely it's a brutal one. I mean, when I mean brutal, they said, hey, Disney, Kevin, how brutal can we get? And they said, well, what do you have in mind? And they went to that level because this episode was just crazy with the action, with the killings, with the bloodbaths, with, just everything. This episode is literally hours after episode 8 ends. And if we remember, after episode 8, Matt takes the bullet for Kingpin from Bullseye, and so he is laying on the ground. They take him to the hospital. It's hours afterwards because everyone is still in their ball attire. They're still in their tuxedos and dresses and stuff like that. And Kingpin and Vanessa go off to their hotel room, and Heather is with Matt and Kristen at the hospital. And mere hours. Daredevil's trying to tell Heather, or I should say Matt is yo, you do not need to, trust Kingpin. He's up to no good. You need to believe me. But he's leaving something very vital out. And he doesn't want to give up his secret identity to someone who doesn't like vigilantes. So kind of playing he's playing hard to get, one should say, or he's stuck in between a rock and a hard place, I should say. So we move on with the episode. A lot of craziness happens. A lot of team-ups happen. I know I've said it earlier, but the brutality and the violence in this episode is turned up all the way. Which I'm not saying I didn't like it, but what I'm saying is my jaw was on the ground because of how wide it was. That some of this stuff was actually shown on Disney Plus. But I enjoyed the episode. I enjoyed it because it connected kind of the entire season into one. And not only did it connect it into one, it set up for future things. And some of those things I'll get down the line when I talk about this episode. We'll break it down a little bit. But it kind of starts off with, after Matt is leaving the hospital, he goes to his own place and he is confronted by Punisher. And him and Punisher have this conversation, and Wilson Fisk's task force is at full, they are full capacity right now. They probably wouldn't turn people away, but at this point in time, the applications are rolling in, let's just say. They have an army. And you kind of have, you have to see Daredevil and Punisher go through these guys to really get to where they're wanting to go. And it felt like, to me, normally in these kind of shows and in these kind of movies for Marvel and stuff, the good guy is always going to win. That going into it. This kind of felt like, yes, it was a setup, season to give us what what's going down the line in season 2 and some other projects. But this one felt like the bad guys won. Um, they, the vigilantes are now criminals because of what Kingpin has set and because of what has been going on. And so, to me, it felt like, hey, we get to see, the good guys trying to, climb this mountain to reach the top, and the villains are already at the top. And so it's going to be an interesting thing to see what they do in season 2. I know I've mentioned it time and time again on this podcast, but there was a whole flip of regime in this show, and you had one team exit while another team came in, and the old team got to keep some of their, points and stuff in it, but you can definitely tell the episodes 1, 8, and 9 that were done by, Benson and Moorhead, and I talked about them last episode. They directed this one as well, and so episode 8 and 9 felt like an Infinity War Endgame type, where Infinity War, it leads into Endgame. That's probably a really bad comparison, but that's how it kind of felt. Like episode 8 goes right into episode 9, and it's just this feeling that I have that I'm very satisfied with this episode, but I understand why some people didn't like it. Yes, it's set up for what's coming next year and a year from now. So we left off on this cliffhanger almost, and now we just have to wait and see. Season 2 is already being shot, so we're gonna get that rolling here in in the next few months, leading into season 2, which I believe they said is March of 2026 is when that release will be. But let's get into spoilers here before we break down what people think, because I think that's going to be the most interesting part of this episode. So I mentioned that Matt is in the hospital with, Kristen McDuffie and Heather, and he has this funny line where Heather goes over to him after he kind of wakes up from being, knocked out or whatever, or on drugs or something, or he's loopy, let's just say, and Heather grabs his hand and he goes, "Karen?" And Heather's like, "Oh, yeah." And it's just an awkward moment there. While he's in the hospital, though, we cut to Kingpin and Buck having a conversation. And Buck, I'm almost positive Buck was told that Matt and Daredevil are the same person. And so Buck is like, "Hey, we got to get rid of this guy because vigilantes are about to be criminals, and if it's shown that a random lawyer took a bullet for you and now he's dead, that's not a good look. Having a vigilante dead, that's a better look." And Kingpin's like, "All right, go do what you got to do." So Buck is going to the hospital with a syringe to drug and kill Matt, but Matt's gone. He left. He is actually going back to his apartment, and like I mentioned earlier, he walks in and Punisher is there. Him and Punisher have this conversation of, Punisher gets a call to come save Matt, and Matt overhears people walking up the stairs. It's the task force, and then we get into a bloody bath of Punisher and Daredevil versus this task force, and when I mean bloody, I mean it's crazy. I mean, the deaths are insane. Gunshots to straight to the head, axe getting thrown into people's head, the Billy Club getting knocked on people's heads. It's crazy. It is insane. And there's a moment where Cold North, who is one of the task force officers, he is kind of stuck with his hand on the wall from a projectile that's kind of leaving his hand stuck, and Frank looks down and finds a bullet casing of his logo, of the Punisher logo, and that's when the pieces start to get put together. If you didn't piece it already, but White Tiger, Hector, earlier in the season gets killed by a rogue cop or a Punisher lookalike, a fanboy as Frank would say, and it's Cold North. Cold North was the one who killed Hector or the White Tiger, and this irritates Matt to the point where he's about to lash out, but he doesn't. Frank's gonna kill him. Matt steps in, and Frank's like, "Are you kidding me? Like, let's just end this." And he's like, "So his life is more important." Da 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 da. They have this conversation, and as they're conversating, Matt stops him and says, "Grenade," and Matt's entire like floor gets blown up. Matt and Frank do escape, and they're walking down the road, and here comes a car with their lights on. Both these vigilantes, and it is Karen Page, the return of Karen Page in this episode, and she was the one that made the call to Frank Castle to rescue Matt Murdock. And they go off, and they kind of stitch up their wounds, and they kind of get ready for the battle that's about to go on. And as they're talking, Frank's like, "Thanks for or I'm sorry, Karen says, "Thanks for doing this favor for me." Frank's like, yeah. Frank is going to go off on his own mission to go kill the rest of the task force, and Matt and Karen are going to go and find Foggy's old report from Dumb Benny. Because if you remember, Dumb Benny was was the person that he was defending, and in episode 1, and then, Dumb Benny dies, and so does Foggy. Well, we realized that Dumb Benny, the reason that this is such an important case and why Vanessa wanted to have Benny and Foggy killed, is because Dumb Benny could have ratted out Vanessa, and that wouldn't have been good on her, and she would have been, thrown in prison. She would have gotten arrested, and it would just gone downhill for Vanessa Fisk, because Kingpin wasn't around. This is about the time where, when Foggy was defending Dumb Benny, and Vanessa had Benny and Foggy killed, Kingpin was not here. And so we learned that Kingpin does know about the hit on Foggy, and so he's like, I understand it. It's fine. I get it. But we now have loads of money, and that's kind of how that all happened. Kingpin then goes on a tyrant, he's just rageful, and he lashes out and says that he wants all the task force to go in, no body cams, nothing. He just wants all vigilantes dead. There's a moment where a young kid is robbing a store, and before I get into this part, all the lights in New York City are completely out. It is pitch black. All you can see is the stars in the sky, and people are going crazy. It's New York. New York is being New York without any lights. So just imagine that. And a kid tries to rob a store, and he gets shot by the police. Well, one police officer was like, "Oh my gosh, guys, this is just a kid. Why'd we kill him?" The other cop pulls down his beanie over his head. He's like, "Look, it's a mass vigilante." That's kind of how we're at with New York cops in the MCU. And so it's kind of crazy. So task force is going out doing crazy stuff. Matt and Karen are looking for Foggy's old files. Punisher is going on a killing spree of all these task force members, but then unfortunately he gets caught, and he gets contained, and the cops tried to recruit him on their side, and Frank's like, "No, not happening." And they try, and Frank's like, "You shouldn't honor me. You shouldn't, use me as your hero. You don't know my pain." It's a very heartfelt, speech that Frank is saying. And, after the decline of the invitation, the task force beats him up and then throws him into a prison. And that's where we leave off with Frank. Matt, on the other hand, is kind of just going through it, saying he doesn't know if he wants to do this anymore. He doesn't know why he's doing this anymore. And Karen's like, "Foggy believed in you no matter what. Both of your lives, he believed in you, and he just wanted to do something where you're not involved because he knew how stressful it was, and this is what happened." And we learn there's a line in this episode where Karen asks Matt, what's it going to take to stop all this? Because there is, like I said, the applications are getting denied from the task force because there's so many members. And Matt looks over at Karen and says, "We're going to need an army." Now, hear me out. What that means, I don't know. Season 2 could feature some of the Defenders, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage. It could involve Miss Marvel because we did see Yusuf Khan in the one of the episodes this year or this season. So it could be a number of MCU characters, or it could be the characters that we see in Josie's Bar, which is like Cherry, some good cops, some other people. Like it just wasn't. It kind of hearing that word, we need an army, and then seeing the people at the end of the episode, where you were like, it is what it is. But I should state this before we get into what the people said. Martial law was intact, or like put in full force by Kingpin. Now, in real life, mayor of New York cannot do that. But in MCU, you can tell how powerful Fisk is because he puts full martial law on New York City. Curfew is at 8 o'clock. Vigilantes are now criminals and they will be arrested on sight. And it's funny because all the previous people that he knows, the millionaires who declined him, swordsman Jack Duquesne, who is, a vigilante technically, all of them are down in this layer, the layer that he kept Adam, and they are locked up like artwork, like full on display for people to come through and walk and look at, and that's where Frank Castle is. I will say this. In the most brutal portion of this episode, Commissioner Gallo of the NYPD is down in this, like, it's almost like a construction area in Red Hook, and he's talking to Kingpin. He's like, "You can't do anything." He's like, "You think you're the Kingpin, but you just you're scared. You can't do anything." Yeah, probably not the wisest words to say to a guy like Wilson Fisk, because Kingpin decks him in the Adam's apple. He bends over and then he hits him in the stomach. He gets on his knees, and Kingpin goes behind him and grabs both of his hands and is putting all of his force on his head. You can hear cracks to his skull. You can just see Gallo's face being smushed together. And then in one fell swoop, almost like a twisting of the neck motion, Kingpin grabs the jaw of Gallo and the other head, so the right side of the jaw for Gallo and the left side of the head, and then just pulls it apart. And you see all of it. Blood gushing, jaw ripped off, head ripped off. It's insane, guys. When I tell you it was my jaw was on the ground like his. Anyways, so that's basically how episode 9, the finale, ends. It ends with Matt in Josie's bar talking about how he's going to get this retribution, how he's going to stop Kingpin and the task force, and that's what season 2 is going to be all about. How is Matt and whoever is a part of his army is going to take down Kingpin. Then we get into the post-credit scene where we see Frank inside this cage. He is talking to one of the task force members, and he kind of says "Hey, you heard about me. I appreciate all your work. I'm thinking, you know who I am." He puts his hand out to shake it. I don't know whoever this task force cop was. I don't know if they put the dumbest person on the planet Earth to watch over these people, because the guy goes over to, Punisher and shakes his hand, and Punisher twists it, breaks it, and then starts pulling him against the cage. And I believe this will lead into the Punisher special that we will get next year, early next year, because we do know that is in works. It's like the regular, like the Guardian special that we got, the holiday special, and Werewolf by Night. It's going to be an hour-long special presentation of just Punisher. So it's going to be probably brutal. It's probably going to be him escaping and kind of, maybe, my fingers are crossed that it's him getting some people together for this quote-unquote army that Matt's building. Or it could be him, on a killing spree to get to Matt and learn more about Kingpin and what's going on. I don't know look, there's a million possibilities about what this special could be. Those are my thoughts. But obviously, you guys heard what I said. I liked the episode. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So let's hear what some of the other people had to say My good friend Alex, which I'll touch upon in just a little bit because we have something special planned. Alex said, incredible. This is his thoughts on episode 9, Straight to Hell, the Daredevil Born Again finale. Incredible, very much so a precursor for what's about to happen, but it summed up season 1 in so many ways. One of the most realistic New York portrayals ever, and seeing the city in shambles had me tense the whole time. Haven't felt like that with an MCU show since Moon Knight, in his opinion. So that was Alex, good friend of mine. That was his thoughts. Steven said, I thought it was solid, not the best, but pretty good. The post credit scene for me made it even better. He said, but we better get some more MCU characters. The show is too above street level where there should be some. Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, somebody in New York has to be in, or has to be on around what's going on in New York. Now, I want to say two things about his thought, which I respect it and I agree. But with that case, I think Spider-Man is obviously, I think that's a no-brainer if they have the rights. I think Spider-Man would 100% be like in the fight. Doctor Strange would also be another one because of where he's living. But if we do remember at the end of Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness, he is probably off in the dark dimension with Clea, so he's probably not around. So you're really looking at and hey, look, maybe I don't know how Thunderbolts is going to be tied into this, if it is even going to be tied into this. But season 2, I mean, maybe we see some other. I really don't know. I could see a Kamala Khan being there, a Kate Bishop being there. I can see some of the old Defenders being there, a return of Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, like Colleen Wang, maybe an Elektra. Like, I can see so many of those characters being in here. But MCU characters, if the rights for Spider-Man get approved, then yeah, Spider-Man for sure. I would 100% want that. So, shout out to Steven, and also shout out to Steven because he made the artwork for my podcast. So he's a good friend of mine. His artwork is incredible, absolutely, and like just so talented. I'm so proud to call him one of my best friends. Josh, who I've mentioned before, he said two things. He watched the Daredevil finale and was a little disappointed, but overall a pretty good finale. I asked him what his thoughts were on it and why, if he could go in a little bit more detail. He said, yeah. He said, my problem with season 1 is that it mainly felt like just a setup for season 2. There wasn't anything resolved. We left in the same place, and we left in the same place the episode started. It was brutal and awesome to watch, but there really wasn't any resolution except setting up next season, and I don't like that. He said with the Netflix series, each season wrapped up in a satisfying way, ending the story and teasing the next season. So I agree with him on some of his thoughts, and again, I respect all these opinions. These are why some of these guys are some of my good friends, is because we can talk about this and have conversations about it. This season was definitely one where everything was kind of like, you can tell the new writers really wanted to push their style and the old writers wanted to push their style. So the new regime comes in and says, this is what we're going to do. We're going to really set up for season 2. Season 1's going to be it's a setup season almost. And I'm okay with that in the sense of what we got in season 1. Perfectly fine with that. Season 2, however, I think that if it can be like season 1 but also wrap up things, season 2 has a really good chance of being one of my favorite Disney Plus shows out there. But again, we have to wait until March of 2026 to see that, so that's that. So then we have another good friend of mine, Sean. He said, he asked me and Steven, because we were in a group chat together, and he asked us, hey, did you see the Daredevil finale? And we said, absolutely, yes. And he said, I hated the episode. And I said, wait, really? Like, because Sean is a huge Daredevil fan. And I'm like, there's no way. There's no way. You're toying with us. He said, yes, I really did. I said, well, what did you hate about it, if you don't mind me asking? This is what he said. The worst case of television ending or edging ever. They set it up with no real result or resolution, only to set it up to continue for the second season. Still pissed that we only get Foggy in the first episode, Karen and Punisher for the two. And then he says, I'm not as pissed about Punisher, but Karen I'm pissed about. I hate to say it, but it definitely feels like it got Disneyed in terms of storyline. Now, that is his opinion. He has the right to it, and I respect him for actually, saying that, because there's some people out there who have these thoughts and will just say, "Oh yeah, it was a good season," and won't actually give it to him. So I really respect him, giving me those thoughts and opinions. I just don't agree. Sean's one of my good friends and one of the best DMs that I've ever played D&D with, and so he's just a really good guy. So his opinion to me matters a lot. But yeah, I mean it's I can definitely see what he's talking about, though. I'm not oblivious to the fact that it is a setup season. I just think that with what we got in this season, from everything that happened, with the behind the scenes stuff, I think this is what they were trying to do, is show how powerful Fisk is, show that he now has an army, his task force. Matt has to climb this hill to beat Kingpin, and that's what we're gonna get to possibly see in season 2. So those are what the people thought. Not a lot of people thought the same, as you can tell. So a very mixed bag of emotions for some people. But I really enjoyed it. I'm very satisfied with season 1. And speaking of being satisfied with season 1, obviously this episode I was talking all about episode 9, the finale. Next week, because there's no episode on Tuesday. I know, sad. Next week's episode is going to be a complete season 1 of Daredevil Born Again recap with my good friend Alex. Him and I have been good friends for a while now. When we were doing major podcasts, we would jump on each other's shows and chit chat and just talk all things Marvel. And so he's going to join me, and we're going to go all throughout the season, kind of give our thoughts on it, what our predictions are for season 2, and then after that, we're going to take a break until Thunderbolts come out. So that's how it's going to go. But guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I really appreciate it. Comment down below what you thought of the season finale. I'm excited to hear what you guys think. But yeah, let me know what you have to say. I'll read it off next episode. But until then, guys, have a good one, and I'll see you next time.